He walked into the bank carrying nothing more than a worn check, a symbol of years of sacrifice, discipline, and honor. But what happened next left everyone frozen in disbelief. A teller's cruel act didn't just rip a piece of paper, it tore open a wound that runs deep in America's story. In minutes, whispers turned into chaos, and a simple errand became a scene no one would ever forget. Why did this veteran become a target of humiliation, and what unfolded after changed everything? It was supposed to be just another ordinary morning. John Carter, a 62-year-old Army veteran, had his routine down to perfection. Coffee at sunrise, a quiet walk through his neighborhood, and a stop at the local bank where he always deposited his monthly check. Life after service hadn't been easy, but discipline and dignity kept him moving forward. He wore his worn cap proudly, stitched with the emblem of his unit, a silent reminder of battles fought overseas. To most who passed him, he was just another older man minding his business. But to those who knew him, John was a man who had given everything for his country. Inside the bank, he greeted the staff with his usual polite nod. He wasn't there for much, just a check, something he'd done countless times before. Yet on this day, something felt different. The line was longer, the whispers sharper, and the air carried a tension he couldn't quite place. He tightened his grip on the envelope, unaware that within minutes his quiet life was about to erupt into something far more public, an incident that would expose just how fragile respect and justice can be. John stepped up to the counter, placing his check gently on the cold surface. It wasn't much, just his monthly pension. To him, it was survival, a piece of security he had earned through years of service and sacrifice. The young teller behind the glass looked down at the paper, her expression shifting in a way that made his stomach tighten. Instead of processing it, she smirked. "What's this?" she muttered, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Her tone dripped with disdain, as though his service, his years, his dignity were nothing. John felt eyes turning. He cleared his throat, steady but firm. "That's my pension check. Just deposit it, please." But instead of stamping it, she held it up for others to see. Murmurs rippled through the line. Then, in one swift, deliberate motion, she tore the check in half, then again, until it was nothing but scraps fluttering onto the counter. Gasps filled the room. Some froze in shock. Others whispered, exchanging looks. To the teller, it was a casual act of power. To John, it was a public humiliation, a message that he was less than the country he once defended. His hands shook, not from weakness, but from a storm of anger and disbelief. He tried to keep his voice level. "That was my pension. You had no right." The teller only shrugged, her eyes cold. "Maybe you should have brought real proof. Anybody can claim to be a veteran." That sentence cut deeper than the torn paper. Years in uniform, years away from home, years risking everything, and now reduced to a stranger's suspicion. Around him, the whispers grew sharper. Some looked away, pretending not to see. Others leaned in, eager to witness the spectacle. The bank manager hadn't intervened. Security guards shifted uneasily but stayed rooted, waiting to see how far this would go, as if the walls themselves held their breath, waiting for John's reaction. And yet he stood tall, gripping the edge of the counter as if it were the only anchor keeping him grounded. He would not lash out. He would not give them what they seemed to expect. But what happened next shattered the uneasy silence. A man in line muttered something under his breath, a slur. He heard it. So did everyone else. The tension snapped. The room was no longer a bank. It was a stage, and he was the unwilling centerpiece of a cruel performance. Every second stretched painfully long. Would someone speak up? Would anyone challenge what just happened? As John glanced at the scraps of his pension drifting to the floor, one thought burned in his mind. This was not just about a check. It was about dignity, about every veteran who had been silenced, doubted, or discarded. And before the day ended, the silence inside that bank would break, louder and more chaotically than anyone could have imagined. The shredded pieces of John's pension check still clung to the teller's desk, some drifting to the floor like ashes of a life reduced to nothing. For a moment, silence held the room, but then the storm broke. A voice from the back shouted, "Leave him alone!" Another customer pulled out a phone, hitting record. Soon, half the lobby had their cameras raised. The humiliation that was meant to stay quiet had just gone public. The teller's smirk faltered, but instead of backing down, she doubled down. "Security," she barked, pointing at John as though he were the problem, as though he had done something wrong. Two guards moved closer, their hands twitching near their belts. The image was unbearable. An aging veteran, a man who once stood on battlefields for the same flag now hanging by the door, suddenly treated like an intruder in his own country. John stood tall, but his voice shook with restrained fury. "You dishonor every soldier with what you've done today." The crowd stirred. Murmurs turned into shouts. People weren't just watching anymore. They were choosing sides. Some demanded justice. Others whispered ugly words under their breath. And then chaos erupted. A customer shoved a guard. Papers flew. Phones flashed. The once orderly bank became a boiling pot of outrage. In the middle of it all, John didn't move. He didn't have to. The room itself was speaking for him now. The truth too big to ignore, too loud to silence. But as the guards closed in, one question burned in everyone's mind. Would this man who had once faced bullets overseas now be crushed by the very system he had served? The bank's chaos eventually drew outside attention. Police arrived, but this time the story wasn't told by the teller or the guards. It was by dozens of phones, by witnesses who refused to stay silent. What could have been swept under the rug became undeniable. The image of a veteran's check torn to pieces, his dignity trampled in front of strangers, spread beyond those walls. John never raised his hand, never retaliated. But his quiet strength in the face of humiliation spoke louder than any outburst ever could. He left the bank that day with nothing in his pocket, but with the truth finally in the open. For him, the scars were deeper than the loss of a check. It was the sting of betrayal, the reminder that the uniform he once wore did not protect him here at home. But for others watching, it was a wake-up call. A moment that forced them to ask, if this can happen to a man who gave his life to service, what does it say about the value placed on anyone else? This was more than one man's story. It was a reflection of a system still cracking under the weight of prejudice and power. And so, as the footage spread and voices grew louder, the question remained. How many more veterans, fathers, and neighbors must endure this kind of treatment before respect and justice are more than just promises on paper? Because until dignity is protected for everyone, the chaos inside that bank is not just a moment, it's a warning.